Hey,
Так,
so um, last time in the previous session, we discussed generosity quite a lot and why the practice of generosity is so important, and the different kinds of generosity and so forth. And today, we'll begin with verse 7, which teaches the practice of discipline, because on the basis of having the perfection of generosity, if we then, on top of that, practice discipline and practice these together, then this is said to be very beneficial. So this is the advice which Nagajuna is giving to the king, Dechuzampo, and Chandrakirti has also made this point in his text called the Madhyamaka Avatara, the entrance into the middle way. So it is said that if one wants to reach the level of a human or a god, if one wants to be born in those kinds of realms, then discipline is a practice that one absolutely must master.
제가 다 된데 인바 인도 제지 소생 마녀 메마 만데 마법 바동 템반제 ছে네 주도 메지 사기도 예된 금지 예된 라바 순슬레다 지게 돈바테기 예예레 제동다 소생 순고야데 냉거레스 데 인도스 루둑 아니 소생 간다지 다 순고레스라 온도 소생 체시 퀄리티 예예죠 그 소생지 순투구레스레 다디까지도 예예레 다 퀄리티 예데 가르세도 마냥 세야데 끼레 메 무마 세야데 니레 만리바 세야데 손레 마바바 세야데 예레 제가 추른 마냥 세도 다 추른 세야데 소제 좀된데 이게 까기 째거죠 친 근데 고예라 론다보지 제가 다 소제야 말이 준라야 말이 세야다고 근데 이게 뭐지 순예라와 자와기도 총알라서 봐 제가 라주 슝아이나 근데 자와기도 총알라서 봐 차송 순토구리레 대 수ren기 체시 퀄리티기 레스 라바르
Tenshi lana, mazo chik
라
kirangi tenshi la songi be tenshi dit surjingi tenshi lana ngazo
말이
ki
체시
ale on definition rabarwa
퀄리티
quality on la. Okay, so the seventh verse here reads, keep your vows unbroken, undegraded, uncorrupted, and quite free of stain. Just as the earth's the base for all that's still or moves, on discipline, it said, it's founded all that's good. So this is what the seventh verse says. To keep discipline is very important, is what Nagarjuna is teaching here. So then the question comes, how shall we keep this kind of discipline? And in this verse, there are four qualities that need to be present in the discipline. So it needs to be, as it says here, in order, unbroken, undegraded, uncorrupted, and free of stain. So these are the four qualities. And when it comes to the first quality of being unbroken, it's, you know, discipline is really like a rule or a law that was taught by the Buddha. So within this falls a lot of different rules, such as not lying and not stealing and not killing and so forth. So in the best case, we would be able to keep all of the different vows and rules laid down by the Buddha himself, such as the four root vows and the five ancillaries and so forth. So this is kind of the quality of discipline.
내가 노지 퀄리티 니바데 메 무마세도 다 chen 로테 강가 수마도나 조 체체데서 순토바시 구그레스 데 퀄리티 nipa teres. Any quality sumbate, mandripa sedu, ta nye mubage kunel hawa do mandripa. Roa, sono duja do mandripa chichene. Any Rodan bu kunel hone, ronla keson tawanda bu kichidu sono tone, any surrente sunshena, tan digi mares, the quality sumbate. Any quality gibate, mababa sedu, 다 소소라 마오바 롱셰 체보 토기레 소얀다보 콘로 텐데 쿠셰 셰와이나 이니 디기 마레 계속 메바지 조셰네 텐데기 체시 예돈 덴비기 추르인기 순 셰바이나 데이 틴둘라 짐바 뇽레 셰 셰바이나 이니 포손 소바 기보지 우기레 살라바
Also, tamade, also maum palang na norjik topna sambeki
나를 계속
samloden.
체보지 우기레 삼반다보로와
Lazo.
소소기 케벤치도 콘로 쿠셰나 디기 마레스
Lazo.
다조 테바침비 깨제도 헤데게로와
Alright. So then we go on with the next quality, the quality of discipline being undegraded. So this then refers to how even if we're not able to keep all of the trainings and the vows, we really ought to do our best to keep the main ones. The third quality is that discipline should not be corrupted. It should be uncorrupted, which means that it should not be stained with an intention stemming from the negative emotions. So there should be no kind of negative thinking or thought of self-benefit behind the sort of our endeavor to keep a certain discipline. And the final fourth quality is that it should be free of stain, which is then to think to oneself, I will keep this discipline because then in the future I will get some really good result from that. I will have some great gain in the future. So that kind of intention is not really all right in this context. So for a really pure practice of discipline, we need all of these four qualities present.
Penangaron to Dobilila message dedu any lumba kawachi, Sasha kawachina, lumba digi, and Dino de Nazo Sun Shevaina, any sozo like a Kareshena, Posum Soba Yungiroa, Tenoshe, any Tanda Gitsurente, Cheshi Giton Dembigone Sun Shevaina, any date into Jimba Yonleshena, Tatunde Yabu Temba Jungiris, Tenenda would hear Yeroa.
So it's the same as in our ordinary life. In human society, we have to keep to whatever laws are established in a given country. And if we do so, then whatever we set out to achieve will go very well indeed. And in the same way, then, in the Buddhist context, if we keep the rules of discipline well, then in the end, we'll get a very good result from that.
Shazan Nazo Nondu Heton Jere, Taba Diga la son jesle, Taba desoge, Soja Jonin de Dite Yabusun Dena, Yinda Kayan Majenayon, Son Jere Sand of Kejayero, Chazon Junse Tesol Tenayon, Surin Sade, El Tonot Tene, Yabusun Shijite, Lengo in Bikeje de Yeres.
So there's a saying in Tibetan that it's possible to reach the level of Buddhahood merely on the basis of the monastic discipline. So just keeping the rules of monastic life, of what it means to be a monk or a nun, merely that will be sufficient, even if one doesn't do any other kind of work or practice. So this really shows how discipline is regarded as something extremely crucial, actually.
And now no matter like it is not so gay, somebody double jigugire like it.
And the real meaning here is actually that we need to guard our minds well.
Somebody double judge Evaina, and ko Noda Kanye Maris. ngazo nyoda hibo yedewa de semba da jabu jama subige any kanga res la yerda ko alona.
So if we're able to really extract the essential meaning from this verse, it's really telling us that a lot of the problems that we have stem from not being able to guard our mind properly, to not being able to take care of our mind properly. And if we were able to do that, then we wouldn't have a lot of the problems that we currently face, actually.
Inde imba induta ngazo sande dabu geyala ta ini ta lega mumbu jizo gugera nomba soje paki jimba tonga tsurin suwa la soba ini ta ngazo sande tanda ngaron tso ki sande pembo cha ngaron tso sande ki yobo ji cha shene ini san pembo ndawu de ki ka tongne ini ngazo yobo ndawu de lega ndo shene ini kale kabo jiunde yerwa ngune sheba ina ngazo pembo cha sande yobo cha toya jizo gugeres 근데 시바 데라 아니 치 녀len sheba nonza soji bigi chiba sheba seya kejeji koya hiyiris.
So then in the Buddhist tradition, it is said that there are a lot of things that we need to do in order to take good care of our mind. So, for example, we have to practice generosity, giving away things. We have to keep discipline. All of these things will help. And in the current situation, it is a little bit as if the mind is the master or the Lord, and we are the servant. And this is not a very good situation. It actually gives us a lot of trouble when the mind tells us what to do and we simply have no choice but to follow along. So actually, we should be the Lord, we should be the one in charge, and the mind should be the servant that we are then able to put to work. And this is then said to be a real Dharma practitioner's behavior.
Shezan dinde imba yin soje jonden derge rong sen yon sun den soje temba yin se lagin do train our mind te ta kong teaching la yero shezan ta de churen sun shene ani ten zo gu yero ta de nengo chong yere ta.
So the Buddha himself also said to perfectly tame this mind, this is the teaching of the Buddha. So this really shows us then that discipline is the very essence of the Buddha's teaching.
Shezan ta churen de la shedon ramda song xie yere le me gi churen jisho gi churen niban ju churen se.
Lao, lenme ki sulchin lana?
Le me gi churen se du ta nga soje gi churen de gelon dabu tawa dabu ji zone ani churen de sung de dewa ina ngaro saya la kanga unsa mare de la kanga unsa mare son ko kune churen ji suna te leba mai pa se ya de chao sumare te yabu churen yabu mare se la bare te churen ki re la bare.
Tadi nga so kandres kyo puina. Legmin ki tsuchim
Lepar
lagbe.
mai pa se du yabu mai pa la yerwa
Ah, las.
kono
Jere,
duja kune soje gi chide
jere,
peje ton ne ron la keson to iki du lega lewarwa
jere,
tawa
tene nipati,
zebarwa
jere, tene
nipa
nipati.
de jisho se du miki ge chendong gayu lega le chana ta nga taba zo go ina chendong gayu lega de la thagi re sone yon korong ge keson gi chidu la taba zo ne soje gi tsun ya jera te yapo maris ona kare
Jere,
gur
tene.
se du nipan ju itsurin de through renunciation mind sine koa de
Mm,
donga imba hakone 다 코알 타 구운도 삼비 손도 데콜레 난다 추린 순 구그레 다야 추린 체시 이기동 덴바데 다부 제구르 같이 부르세데 텔란 주구투네 예와디 고구게레
jere, tene nipati, tanya kurang no yapo gotsu ma sonla.
지쇼스 둔지파 헤노
Ah, le gyepa.
지파 헤노 페
Jere,
토파
ah, jere, las. So here, discipline is explained to be threefold. There are three kinds of discipline, three ways of kind of explaining what discipline is. So we have incorrect discipline, discipline based on fear, and discipline based on renunciation. So the first one would then be to think, if I join the order of monks, then I won't have any problem with getting food and clothes. Basically thinking about one's own benefit merely for this life, and then deciding to become a monk. And this is
Or
not
not only monk become Dhamma practitioner, also same.
or even to become a Dharma practitioner for that kind of reason is incorrect. And then the second would be discipline based on fear. So in the case that one has committed some really grave crime or done something that's considered unforgivable, one feels a strong sense of fear and regret and thinks that I'm really beyond all hope in ordinary human society, so I better just go and become a monk. This is not also a very correct way to approach discipline. And then the last one, discipline based on renunciation, is to really think about the defects of samsara and to generate the wish to leave samsara. This is then the correct approach to discipline, to take up discipline from this kind of motivation.
Oh, that tende xie zang, that tende ki tsurin de sung xie ne, any jimba tong xie ba yin na, ta pendo xibo ngiri ma do, yin tsurin yabo ma su ne, jimba tong wa yin na, mi ji, gongba ji, cha ne, lega zoya no shen ji yiris. Any, de la ta pendo ye ma ra, oman jiba long le pa den dawa traba xie ye rwa, o tende re la ba re ta.
So to take up this kind of discipline and practice it well, if we then practice generosity, this will go very well and have a very good result. Otherwise, if we try to practice generosity without a proper foundation of discipline, then it's a little bit like a person with a broken leg trying to accomplish some really difficult task. And this has also been um, spoken about by Chandrakirti
In Madhya Mata text rwa.
in the Madhyamaka Avatara, the entrance to the middle way.
Tene, tene judu meji sagi du yeten ki ju yinde laba son se du tayon suren de kachewa yinbe ki junse de xie yere pe na sagi nonshin re se suren de sagi la jowa me do senchen de so yon tengi res mu jowa komba don re la soba sagi la tengi res de nonshin suren de la deba don nije don yinba la soba positive ke ta knowledge quality de so kanga best tsurin le zone ugoyaji ta chode yeres jezang ta tsurin de gachi wores labar.
So then here the last two lines of the verse reads, just as the earth's the base for all that's still or moves, on discipline it said, it's founded all that's good. So everything that's moving, such as all sentient beings, and everything that doesn't move, such as all the houses and mountains and trees and so forth, just as they rest on the earth forms the basis for all of these things to exist. All of the positive qualities that we might wish to obtain in the Buddhist path, they all are founded on the basis of discipline. This is what this verse teaches. So it's said then that discipline is really, really important.
Tene ta nga tu tsike jeba dehi ta teba chenbu ge paru shimba tu seya tene ji nyolin shea yeres teso tene ludu chorong ge nanda ludu ge jabo chorong ge nyolin shea longlin shea na shira pento chenbu yere ka chenbu yere se le yon teba chenbu ge loso ge gona yon 6 parameter korji yon ke ye wa yimbare.
So now moving to verse number 8, this verse teaches about the six perfections, the six paramitas in the Mahayana, in the great vehicle of Buddhism. And in this verse, Nagarjuna is instructing the king that if you practice these six perfections, it will be very beneficial. So it's very important that you take up this kind of practice.
세상 수련인데 야보지 송 근데 쟤네 아니 자보 대시선 뭐 저런 게 대발 친구기 녀를 파신 두대 녀를 야보시 나 아니 소지지 컴포운데 토토발라서 봐다 근데 중기 예레슬레 다 파신 두보데 가리가리 임바 아니 다 대소 짜치고 간데 임바 근데 그거 디게 예레 이제동 소ren 제제 손땡동 대기 혈아 야메 파로신 데도 젠제 시베 잔송이 파로신베 자이 온본제스 라바
So then here in this verse, Nagarjuna is telling the king that if you are able to keep discipline well and then engage in Mahayana in great vehicle practice, it is possible to reach the level of Buddhahood. So then in this verse, it talks about the six perfections, the six paramitas, in terms of what they are and in how they are important. And the eighth verse reads, generosity and discipline, patience, diligence, concentration, and the wisdom that knows thusness. Those measureless perfections make them grow and be a mighty conqueror who's crossed samsara's sea.
계속 대인도 시그스파라 두 예바 노라 동보데 다 짐바르와 다나 파라메타르와 니바데 실라 파라메타 숨바데 샨티 파라메타르와 애니 젠두 파라메타 손텐 파라메타 케라 파라메타 대소 가메 세두 테바 침부게 파신 두보데 테바 멤바 니데도 론송제 대소 로유둘라 레투기 마레 코조기 대소 콜라 소노 통투기 마레 테바 침부 파신 두보데서 메유 자침보레 아니 팽야요 기로 자침보 예레 세존 텐데 임바 인두 아니 테바 멤부게 파베 콘사테소 로유라 노기 마레 슬라바
Pajin Rupoe, Tama.
Yeah.
So within the six perfections, the first is generosity, dana paramita. Then the second is discipline, shila paramita. The third is patience, kranti paramita. Then the fourth is diligence, virya paramita. The fifth is concentration, or sometimes meditative concentration, dhyana paramita. And the sixth is the perfection of wisdom, prajna paramita. And it is said that the practitioners of the Shravakayana, the foundational vehicle of Buddhism, cannot understand the Mahayana six perfections. It simply doesn't fall within their mental capacity. It is totally beyond them, actually.
가르스나 테바 김비게 파신 두보테소게 미유테 자침보 예레스 아니 선제 몸보기라 펜타오기레스 아니 테바 김비게 파신 테소 빼나 다 겐보 숑바긴 도데진 테소론 라로와 숑추 선비 진바네 마샤 메샤 차바메 차바니 좀 많이 라소베 고네 아니 제시 donla subu gone any cheba do poyes ta hyeiro ta dezo cheki tengi yeme ha mogo gongje ani shonchu senba nang ki nyangsu lenji pashin tubo de ani teba chimbu ki nyonglen ki zawanda bo de chawde yeres la no ger
Tekpa chenpo nyamlen ki tsawa rebe.
oh
And the reason that the Shravakayana followers cannot understand these perfections is because the scope of the Mahayana perfections is very vast. It benefits a lot of beings on a great scale. And there are also verses which speak about 7 qualities that distinguish the Mahayana in terms of the vastness of its scope and so forth, the vast vision of Mahayana. And so essentially, then these 6 perfections are the root of the practice of the great vehicle in Buddhism.
그래서 내가 genze sibi jansunyi parushimbi jayi ombunze sidu eni kondi kibiki pashin tubo teso nyangli shene teso nyangli de kompi de tong sheba ina beni pichin drago de kare ilasana eni mao ba siba kosung kowa jansun noke ting sabo yeba tene pa rongi tane soje cha tugiri senchi yen yon eni soje chabala pendo lega de zo tugiri shezang 아니 테바 침부기 파신 두 녀리시야데 다 nengo 카체부지 차스바레다스레 아니 자부데시 좀발라 루두게 니스라 셴네 아니 제네 가론소 다 넘바 소제바 인케 로버드 테바 침비치 녀리신기 뜻솔라 에드바이스 테 송아리
So therefore, since these perfections are something which, when put into practice, can take us from this shore to the other, something which can help us cross, be free from the 3 realms of samsara, which are likened to a deep ocean. Since we're able to cross this vast ocean of samsara, and since we're also able to help all other sentient beings through the practice of the paramitas, it's very important to take up and perfect the practice of these 6 perfections. This is the message of Nagarjuna to the king, and then indirectly to us as well.
계속 대인도 테바 침비기 파루심바 두보데 소닝기 온들레우게리 accumulation of merit accumulation of knowledge 로 계속 소님보데 마존나 아니 가조 꾸니 동바데 토야예 마레스 예예로 계속 답변나 단다 짐바동 수련동 제바데소 세나기 초레스 아니 게라도 손텐데소 이게 초레스 전주대 초니까레 로반도야라 구기에레 텐데 고네 아니 파신 두대 초니 차송아레스 아니 초니데 조네 아니 레부 꾸니셀레 세나기 초게 레부 주쿠 토기레스 이히게 초게 아니 레부 체구데 톤도기레 세상 텐델 소노 톤도요 아니 다테바 친구 파신 두 녀리셔야데 다 냉거 쳐버리 대 잡부 조롱 친구기레스 한다고 라송아레
So then, through the practice of the 6 perfections of the great vehicle, we're able to gather the 2 accumulations. So the 2 accumulations are the accumulation of merit and wisdom or knowledge. And based on these 2, it is possible for us to attain the result of the 2 kayas, the 2 enlightened bodies of Buddhahood. And among the perfections, the first 3 of generosity, discipline, and patience contribute to the accumulation of merit. And the last 2, wisdom and meditative concentration, constitute the accumulation of wisdom. And the 4th, diligence, is something which is applied to all. And through the accumulation of merit being perfected, then we will attain the result of the Rupakaya, the form body of a Buddha. And through the perfection or the complete gathering of the accumulation of wisdom, we will be able to attain the Dharmakaya, the body of reality.
Oda tende reese. Tene ta sache nipa li yere. Chimba nala tsoche damba la gu ye se ya di ke yere ta. Ta ludu ke tso ko chimba pomu teso le che du she she ne. Hlajanda munda gu ke jaji ta he yin se. Ta jabu de chimba rawa. Householder rawa. Shezon ta ti ke jaji so he yin se. Ta tombo de kar se du. 소소 게 파마데라 야보조야 파마라 쿠샤시야 파마라 가슈드야데 냉거레 다세 깨제지 준스도 제비 거네요 시제 고바데 기게 바레 공라 파동 마도 제바이 리동 총제 로벤 제발라 대도 란제 더번 좋아도 에말라요 토린 좋아라스
Laso. Lapcha gu yorbe
구글로 다
kimbatansul.
동보 레레레요
Laso. So that's the case for the
메일리 침바 포몰라 라자
laso.
구예리
Laso. So that's the case for the perfections, the paramitas. And now from the next verse onward, verse number 9, Nagarjuna will give 9 pieces of advice that are mainly aimed at householders, those who do not live a monastic life. So since the king is a householder, these pieces of advice are especially relevant for him. So the first piece of advice then is what is taught in verse number 9, which is that it's very important to respect our parents, to give veneration to our parents. And the verse then reads, those who show their parents great respect with Brahma or a master will be linked. By venerating them, they'll win repute. In future, they'll attain the higher realms.
라소 셰존 테인두 공라 파도 마도 체바인 세두 미기리 카케 타 루소 카케라 아니 소소게 파도 마테솔라 페미시 타 체보 츠네 아니 파도 마라 간데 두네 야보 존킹케 텐데키 리 텐데 용 콘조민라 셰동 예레 셰바레 오다 텐데 테소 아니 릭타와 좀보 리 야보 생킹케 깨제테 예이레슬레 텔로두게 자볼라 수바레 초론 드레테 조구기레슬 다 제네 나론솔라 라우예로와
Denera burikte pe yapores pe zampores denera burwe.
fortunate ke ta chabares
Laso. So here it says that those who show their parents great respect, those being a certain kind of people in the world who are very, skilled at this particular thing, which is to venerate our parents. They're very fortunate, and this is a very, very good thing to do.
다 준신 라보테 파말리 야보셰 파말리 가시 후트데 셰나 총제 로벤 제바 라스라두 아니 가르세고로 총제라나 라테소 기용 아니 야보시레스 예르다 아니 가르세고 라예로다 라테소 기요 나론솔라 다보제 나론솔라 순쇼시 나론솔라 로반 제지레스 대가 노신 로벤도 제바세도 소소 라마테소 기신라용 파말리 야보신기 지라 레지레스 다보 초롱 루드 나기신라 테소 중기레스 파말리 야보시나 다 nengo chibu레스 라바
So then the second line reads that with Brahma or a master will be linked, which essentially means that gods such as Brahma will assist or protect those who treat their parents well and who respect their parents. And it also says they will be linked with a master, which means that our lamas, our gurus, will grant their blessings or will be able to receive the blessings of our gurus if we treat our parents well and with the due respect that they deserve. So then Nagarjuna is telling the king that please do treat your parents with respect. This is very beneficial and it's very important.
Tini jabo chorong la naga junga kogi hina teo le tugi re la bar.
Kongi kare?
Kongi
Shinkam.
blessing te chorong la
Oh,
togi
that's
res.
Nagarjuna Rangi.
Naga juna de jabo ki lama rwa. Ani jabo ki
Oh,
pamal kusha she she na ani hina teso togi res.
so then this verse has a quite personal undertone as Nagarjuna himself is the king's lama or guru. So Nagarjuna is instructing the king that if you treat your parents well, then my blessing will be able to reach you in that sense.
Ta te indu ta nga zo zombili la mi ri kake yero pama teso lo chebo chao ne hido yedu ani luba gendal go ga yanda bo komba gendal go nda ga yanda yero ta teso unfortunate chabaro ani teso ge chilu kare zogi ye na yo chilu kare gla te ki ta roba zogi mare se yanda bo keja ji he u yero ta nga zo sono to ya re.
So basically, in this world, there are many kinds of people, and there are some who would not, as their parents grow older and reach old age, would not care for them personally, but would rather maybe take them to live in a retirement home and make other people help them and care for them. So then this is actually an unfortunate situation. This kind of people are engaging in an unfortunate kind of behavior. And no matter what kind of religion they follow, what kind of gods they believe in, those gods will actually not help them because they're not respecting their own parents.
Keso sono to ina nga zo chilu kare le yishi zogi ye na cheba mundu nga zo pama dili yabo shigu ya de ka chebore. Pama mena nga zo pena nga dewa ina kimbo chaya ye mare. Pama mena chorong nomba soje ba chao ne tashin jume chorong keju yabo chaya koka ye mare. Ani nga sonje ya koka ye mare. Ani chilu yinda ina yon professor chaya koka ye mare, lawyer chaya koka ye mare, ju chebo chaya koka ye mare, Elon Musk chaya koka ye mare. Shazan deso sono tong sheba ina pama de za chebo yinba. Ani za chebo yinbi gone tilin tek goya te pachi sono tong ne sheba ina ha kotoya ji chogi res.
So basically, no matter which religion we believe in, this is something that we really have to think about. It's really something that we should ponder over, the kindness of our parents. So Kempula is saying that for me, I couldn't have become a Kempo if it weren't for my parents, all of their kindness and hard work. And then he addressed me and said, you couldn't have been a translator. And then in the same way, whatever work people might be engaged in, whether that be lawyer or doctor, they couldn't reach such kind of levels of achievement if it weren't for their parents. And Elon Musk couldn't have become Elon Musk, right? Without his parents, right? So we really have to think about how kind our parents have been and all of the opportunities that we have now that are there because of them, right? We have to consider our fortunate situation in light of their kindness, right?
Oda nesu tenderes.
So,
Teni shedon teda lanche taban jowa don lema tori to anju sedu tije shima teni any pamale yabo sheba ina any tsendela yon ko pamale yabo zonkere me yabore me zombore ko me yabore quality yankere sele any kedo chogires any jema maopa shewa shima la hlaiki shewa zombo de mi ki shewa zombo tende toba ki koka tende chogiri shezo ta pamali kashi ku yabu shiyade nengo cho songa reda asili ta ludu ki jabu deshe zombo li she shene eni jene ngaron zola ta sheyi yere kasna kone nga zo yon heating nyesa ki roma ki tere le songa odiri.
so these are the facts then. Um, the last two lines of the verse reads, by venerating them, they'll win repute. In future, they'll attain the higher realms. Meaning that in this life, if we treat our parents with respect, we'll be known for that fact and we'll have a good reputation. And later on in our subsequent lifetimes, we'll be able to be born in divine realms, in God realms. So then Nagarjuna is instructing the king that please do observe this practice of being kind and respectful towards your parents. It's very important, and indirectly then he's telling us the same thing.
Ta pena ngaron so mide misete successful chog yena 다 애니 초가 야보지 요나 나마 야보지 두국이로 와 애니 successful 저기로 와다 저런 그 파말리 야보 맞제 바이나 파마 소소 그 파말라 야보 뮤직기 미데 나말리와도 마발리야 셰바이나 티네 다 야보지 쳐야 예 마바 예 마로 다데 미기 소노 동기로 와 레바 셰저 다 파말라 야보 셰셰와이나 미조보 야보 둘라네 아니 초가이나 티 게미 구기도 상기레 게미나 테 초가 구기도 상기레 데소 강가 펜수 찌기찌라 가르세고 텐디조 셰네 아니 미세스 सक्सेसफुल 저기로와 그래서 깨자 문복 거야 이리스.
So, for example, in order to have a successful human life, in order to our life in a way that's beneficial and successful, for example, it's considered very important to be married to a good spouse, a good husband, a good wife, and so forth, depending on our preferences, right? If we do treat our parents well, then we'll be renowned for that. We'll be known as a good person overall, and this will then help our chances to find a suitable partner. And it will also act as a kind of auspicious condition, tenjel in Tibetan, for being able to lead the rest of our life in a good way, essentially, if we start out with treating our parents well.
다 단단히 라야데 조 가조 배바게 손은 동동다고 온도시네 해가 와르다 아요 가르세 노쇼 그미테 조그 손은 간데 예 히라하고 마소 이나다 미임바 지바로와 초아예바 지바로와 지바라고 인지로와.
So this is mainly kind of from the point of view of a Tibetan way of looking at things. So I don't know whether Westerners might have a totally different way of looking at this, but we're all the same in that we're human, and our sort of basic outlook of respect towards our parents should be one and the same, actually, although we have some cultural differences.
대인도 단다기 에드와이스인데 다조 미샤 포물라 라셰바레 미샤 포무테서 파마기 차라 논주시보 차르 대기에로와 그래서 파마기 차라 대 전에 애니 찬찬 파마리 해가 로야지에로와 파마라 마가와 쳐야지에로와 그래서 대솔 손노 동시에 루두게 라스와 임바레 자불라 파마리 야부 시구르 다슬레 페나 나조 샤 무흐야 파리와 비진 Pijin de Lagon Konla de Yero, any co pemesi, Lagon do Rivo Choshene, Lagon do Desole Kusha Jun Shie Mare, Chabaton Shiero, Tenoshin Pama Gital Jurimbo Desana, any Pamali Kanga Tesi, Nesuyeri, Cheson, Tindek Mawi Chidula, Sonoton Shene, so householder Tesuki Chidula, Kajan de He, Suare, Mado, Tabadon Lama Tesuki Pamali Roba Shigugi Mare. 파말 야부 시국이 말이 깨져도 해게 말이 이나 잡아도 라마데서 파마 차리케로 대게 봐라 그 gem바노 대대게라 오네스트네 임바리 사보시나
So in this way, this advice is mainly given for the benefit of lay people. And this is because lay people typically stay longer with their parents. So then sometimes if one spends too much time with one's parents, it happens that one would sort of turn against them and feel resentment towards one's own parents. So this is similar to the case of a pigeon who lives in a temple. So just living there, keeping it as its home, then that's, it wouldn't feel any kind of respect for the temple. So through excessive habituation, there's sort of a lack of respect that arises essentially. So with this in mind, with this common situation in mind, Nagarjuna is specifically directing this advice towards householders, those who lead family lives, and not monks and lamas, right? But it's not as if it's okay for monks and lamas to not treat their parents well. It's simply the case that this situation doesn't arise so commonly for them because they don't spend that much time with their parents. They typically live their lives apart from families in the monasteries, right?
오다들이 다 시제 큐바 데히 다 지테바 침바 데소게 시동 논주 미존 셰링고 고 셰셰네 두제 톨로 히로 동기리스 셰존
La,
데인두 미샤
gozo,
포모 데예로 침바
oh,
미샤 포모 예라 하우스 호더
oh,
데소게 미존
right.
셰라 가보 셰네 텔랑고 코네 두제 톨로 모보 동기리스 테 두제 톨로 모보 동나 야보 문두스 루두게 아니 자보 데시 좀볼라 초론 찬찬 다 가세고 인로 제denki dombaji lenshene nyune seyaji sunle nyole shena ani pento yabu hiro yeri dasile tineki koji kejaji yere yon
Right. So then the 10th verse, it speaks about how essentially it's the case that householders would waste a lot of their time on um, non-celibate behavior, basically sex. It's something that lay people waste a lot of time on. And with this in mind, Nagarjuna is instructing the king in the practice of keeping the eightfold vow, one of which then is to keep celibate, to abstain from all sexual activity in order to not waste time, basically.
kezang sedong changkung tiba zondong ne chondong dumi sela chobadong marding tola gardong ludodong gardong tiwen cheba nampong hi dajang suren jesu shibayi yinlo jebon deda tong dena sojon deje lalu yonwa sheba pume tola tsawa jeseleta cije chubado chujiki hiendu hindwa oteri.
So this is what Nagarjuna teaches in verses 10 and 11, which reads, eschew all harm, don't steal, make love, or lie. Abstain from drink, untimely greed for food, indulging in high beds and singing too. Refrain from dancing, all adornments shun. For men and women who keep this eight-branched vow and emulate the vows the Arhats took, their wish to nurture and to cleanse will grant them handsome bodies as celestial gods. These are verses 10 and 11, right?
다 동보 순야 게인로 동 제바 세야데 뉴네 게 동바 게인로 제바 세야데 가리임바데 말라인도와 세동 기레 청국이 니레 티바게 손레 종기 예레 tene chongi ngari du mai bi sela choba poate dure martin thoa la de musho wa de donre tene lo don ka don tima te son ki shene ta nomba jebo de la yin lo je se le ta te pa pong shene ani nima chi gi rin la nigo tu ji gi rin la ani nyune domba se ya ji sun ya yere o ta de sun she ya de nengo ri de taba ani yuten tholo ton nan di mares o da tendre ke ja ji ke so are
Ähm, sagen also, not see on the shoot double check it. Also
mare
tambo
tama son de ji te gru tama son de ji la te gru
Amazon de chi. Ah, la sa. Oh,
tanda lu don ka
Manda
don
manda.
tinwa se de ji te gru
Ah, la. Oh, Tene din song also ge tu se
kar
te
ka do ge tsuno gi roba chu se de kagarinde
la sa. Getsul din kagare. Tene
re re re
ngaso din so la chene ngaso pet tutsima potola tangides. Tene din so
mare ta de so pa pong ne ani nga zo domba ji sun ya yeres ani maison she de chang ga ne chang chang de domba de language nyu ne la yi ro chang chang nga zo nyu ne de se ya je wa nyu ma ne se ko ni go tu ji ro wa ni ba ta 24 hours le te zi mo chang ji ro wa o da de du ni kare kare sun gu yi ba domba kare kare sun gu yi be ke je de ke yi ro wa
okay. So here to begin with, the different vows to be kept are explained in due order. Then the eight different branches of the vow, right? So first is to not harm.
yes
Second, not stealing. Third, um, abstaining from sexual activity. Four, not lying. Five, not drinking. Six, not eating untimely in the improper time. Seven, not sleeping on a high bed or using a high seat. And then eight, to abstain from singing, dancing, and wearing jewelry, basically, adornments. So these are then something that we, for a period, would give up. And there's a practice called nyungne in the Tibetan tradition where one takes these vows for 24 hours.
shezanta tsewa se de so che ye mari la ro ka ti du nga zo ni go tu ki la so che gla ga she ye mas bu se la so ba de she ye mari te ki domba de sung re la wa ro
Busea yomares.
o ta sen chi kare ina se ye mari wa ta
Oh,
nga zo nyu ne de ne che du ye ro
mm. So to abstain from harm means to not engage in any killing of any sentient being whatsoever, including insects.
ene ku she ye mari ska ti du nyu ne de bi ki rin te la ni go tu ki la domba sun ne ku she ye mari ene tripa she ye mari zun la ye mari chon tu ye mari du mai bi se sa ye mar si du ta nga zo barabaji chuse chuni khalo de sa ne any soni na ma se yu padla nga zo sa chogi mara je zon teso gu domba teso sun gu gires any tri temple de ye maris tri tru kong ma to de ye maris nyasa temple de ye maris nyasa temple de tri temple teso de na nga shivo insa de son nga jo shi gires nga jo pong gu gires ta de da wo chere ta de ge don cha so tini lo tong ya ye maris ta enji ge na jago ge teso gin de chao le ya zo ge ro tini dance je ya ye maris de chao le ya zo ge res ani zubo le jin chan da mun da ta ani shupan da mun da shya la so ba tinde zo ye mari teso gin de chao le ge res ta teso sun de ji chu du ne any je tonka je chaw so tendege ta domba de sun shigugure any new len yen lo je de domba sun se de chaw res la ba.
So then the eight-branched Nyungne vow, if we continue, it is taught that it's not okay to steal, to engage in any sexual activity, to lie, to drink alcohol, to eat at the improper time, which means one eats the last meal at noon, 12 o'clock, and then one fasts until dawn the next day. So to not eat after that time period, that is the vow. To abstain from sleeping on a high bed, which means not using a bed that's higher than something like 12
Tokong.
inches. Basically a forearm's length. It shouldn't be higher than one's forearm. Because if one sleeps on a high bed, one will think, "Oh, I'm really quite something. I'm kind of a great guy," and will have a lot of pride, basically. So then the last three are taught together: no singing, no dancing, and no wearing jewelry, because all of these are something which increases our desire, basically. So these are something that we give up then for the duration of the practice of Nyungne, and this is called the eight branch vow of Nyungne.
Kesa ta tendege yen lo je don de bi nyune de ni go tul ki li sun she ba ina ani nyema da chamba khari pu do monga ji te so ke suren sumba no shin ani suren yabo sumba ji chogi re se la ba.
So then to keep this eight branch vow of Nyungne for 24 hours, for example, is something which becomes similar to the discipline that's been kept by the Buddha's great disciples, such as Shariputra and Maudgalyayana, the great arhats.
Kesa ta benefit kare yere la na tende shine nyune ni go tu ki li sun she ba ina benefit te ani maung pa na hlai ki lute pena sun chu tsa sun ki lane yin chu onji chuga garden sele tende xe yewa ngaron so dekang ki la dekang zu kan zu mi kan se sun xe du dekang ki la ne zu zebo ye don wa lo son semba thon dong da wo tende ki lu den de ani thogi re se nyu ne yen lo je de ki domba sun ki shiba do pumi te so la thogi re ta shiba pumi ma do lo thoya ye mare ka na shiba pumi ki ten ma do domba thoya ye mare wa o tende res ta kesong chimbo khiwo ye re chezong ani jabo deshi zombo choron teso nyongle shigu re se le la ne ani ti gene ta householder teso la to chibo la swa yiba tende re tini ngapa teso la swa yisa re ta genon lo lagi mara ko genon cheme ye mara ta o tende re.
Um, so the benefit then of keeping such a discipline, this eightfold Nyungne vow, is that one will have a godly body, essentially. So sometimes in our temples, right, we put statues or we hang paintings of depicting the deities, the gods of Tushita, or the heaven of the 33, Trayastrimsha. And these gods are extremely beautiful, such that even just looking at them for a moment would immediately captivate our minds, basically make us, immediately fall in love with them. So these are gods who belong to the former realm. Um, yeah, essentially for a man, you will have an extremely beautiful body, and for a woman, same case, right? So this is probably a teaching that's well, it's given by Nagarjuna to um, the king Dechizangpo because he's a householder, and it's probably the case that the Buddha would give these kinds of teachings for the benefit of ngappas, of lay tantric yogis, and not for monks because they don't have wives or partners, right? So why would they need such a handsome body, right?
Kezong ta teki nga zo diri session de tsawa re tini next 산들라 아니 지제 걸세 지제 중이 조선 쪽이 쟁한테서 해야래 셔스 다 빼미지 가치보 빼미지 나론 솔 코르체보든데 뭐지 해인두스
줍시 발도를 왜?
어 쪽이 쟁아 벌린 인사리다
알라.
중이
아니,
조선 쪽이 쟁아 벌라 다
그래, 네,
지제 드네기 지제 유보데기 빼미지 자체보든데 해인두 가서 논주 미셀랑 코야 된데
그래, 네, 나서 가장 엄마 들라 티와 틸랭 고갑 되기레스
레리데
나서
다 들이 떼기로
다리바.
단다 떼기로 알아 다 들이 떼
라스.
단다 떼기로 와
음,
휴마게 자 니말이 해야라 다 같이 보던데 우긴두스 라쇼
라스. All right, so this will be it for the verses for this session, and in the next session we'll cover up until verse 15, and these verses are considered very, very important. They give some really crucial pieces of advice, and then now, if there are any questions, there will be some time for question and answer.
다 저런 레 야보 제거다 나 하고 말다
Also,
미카게 누에
äh, also.
다 제법인데 다 바지 까마 쭈예사레
I have a
So we
question.
have, oh
Um,
yeah, this.
Earlier you mentioned that the mind controls the body and speech, right? And that isn't really good. Can you kind of elaborate on that a little bit more? What should, like you said, we should control our mind. What do you mean by we?
Là. Kimber like the keranki ngomajik songsa
산 다보
um
제거를 라서 가서
sem di pempo chagidos nganzo yoko chagidos ta ona sem di lubotang nga di wang yur de giores ta ngaranzo ki pempo chagores yineang keranki ngaranzo slavion de ngaranzo se de dugos karerago yores ta tunda kanres.
나다 나론 소세나 소소
So when we say we have to become the master, it refers to ourselves, right? We as the individual.
다 닌다고 제라 나도 코세 닌다고 제라다 다 디리 다
Ngata.
된다 내가 롱리 나도 소소데 단다 생기 여보 전에 아니 나도 생기 가리 나와야나 yes 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 사슬 죽으로다 다 슈마 생기 나조라 yes yes 사 생기 지 차구그로와 딜라이에
So essentially, the the referent of saying we is ourselves, right? So there seems to be two. There seems to be you and me,
나론
right?
소스
So we, right? Um, and the current situation then is one where the mind gives us orders. Essentially, you have to do this, you have to do that, and we are stuck in a situation of just having to say yes, yes, yes. But we
때나
have to flip the script and make the mind be the one saying yes, yes, yes.
단다 나조 가디 쳐데리 나조 마인드 데 가딘 레고 쳐데리와 다
Gajila,
나조 가리 가디 모타 예라 모타
lengas semdi motanashides.
나조 모타 노시레 센데 모타 똥킨
Um,
레고 노시로와
mm,
제가 다 나조
that,
가리 구거르세나 나조 레고 쳐 구기레 센데 모타 쳐 구기레
mm. So basically, in the current situation, it is as if we are the car and the mind is in the driver's seat. But we need to make sure that the mind is instead the car and that we are in the driver's seat, basically.
Through practice of 6 parameters.
Through the practice of the 6 paramitas.
Next question.
I have a question. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm wondering if you can talk more about how renunciation and discipline go together, because you mentioned if our discipline is guided by selfish intention, that it's not so good. And so I'm wondering if we want to develop our renunciation in a way where it's motivating our discipline, if you have any advice for having clear motivation when it comes to discipline.
Okay. Tak, krangi sumba ini so ngejung ki kunne langbe ki chuchimchi gogi dus iso kadini nyamdu drobo dus krangi songi do so ki chulchim sungyala so ki kunlongdi dagzin la tene chumbayina ti yapo marwas tene kunlongdi kandes krebres ore
Tamo keja koma son.
la
Surin la te keja de ko mundu morongi roa. Nagi keja de yabo ngote mundu morongi.
la
Nagi surin de la damunda son yere se la waroa.
oh de
Niban ju surin se de kachabu res. Niba kadru koa de shenki rongi yimba ha kone de ne nga ya ta gugindu nga sonje cha gugindu saune taba she lama she any soje gi trinte sum she jierwa te kachibu res la war.
di moram pesha ko sara ine kunlong di chik yage tang la kerang lapsa kharaja yes ta
Ale ta tinde ina roa ta nga zo lumba chobo tinde ndo gugiroa. Any koa de donga grogi ba ha koru ndogi roa. Any time koa le nginju de cher ndone any koa ge ta ge lega de so le shi roa. Shezan nginju se de ta chebo shibo jindu nginju se de nomba soje bo chaya la first gateway te resha.
One way to develop our renunciation is actually to go to a poor country to see some hardship. And then we'll be able to see what the faults of samsara really are. And based on such an understanding, then we'll be able to feel a stronger sense of renunciation. So renunciation kind of forms the gateway for our first entrance into Buddha Dharma. So it's something very, very important.
Shezan te indu daja gitemba zobe soje jondende jabu poro ne shilo chi ne any koi donga mombo tone ne any kola nginju lo de le ne any koro gicheme don pugu yu she ne daba zo ne ganja ne soje cha so shezan nginju de bil of zoyala ne su chobo tende mombo ji hako tugu gindoa.
So it's also the case that our teacher, the perfect Buddha, in his lifetime, at one point went outside of his palace and he saw the suffering that was present in the world. He saw the hardship that people were going through. And this then inspired him to go forth on the path to awakening and to actually reach awakening. So in order for us to develop the same kind of motivation and to reach the goal on the same kind of path, it is actually important for us to see people in these kinds of circumstances, to see what suffering really is like with our own eyes.
Pena ngaron ke nyonyo tone shuba ina tanga lo nyeku grila pachi jaga nyeku tachi tsanchi la ngando sons America la chinson Canada la chinson Takasakala Chinson, San Paulo Landoson, Colombo Landoson, Singapore Landoson. Takanga Donga Grongi Mato Mindu. Any nga Ninju de Cher Cher Tangune soje jondin de sansara de full of suffering said the ngune recha se agile hindu shezan tanga zo wandiri no mombo zone koi gi ne don chobo te so mombo hakko gu hindu kadam bi lama jindu ta ko gemo jun ko gi mundu lore tomba dona pas black face se la gindo ko karsi gemo ko gi mesedu ko al mata na gemo ko ya reason mundu se hindu 다 근데 노신 손노 동 셰와이나 아니 인중대 체리체린도네 아니 치도야라 두제데 때데 체리체린도네 아니 소제 고간두스 셰자 인주세데 extremely important to the years buddha dhamma nyolin choba shiwala.
So Kimball is saying now, if he speaks from his own experience, then over the course of 20 years, he's been to some 21 different countries. So including Canada, America, some Sao Paulo, and so forth, many different countries. And during the course of all of this wandering, of this traveling, renunciation has only grown larger, has only grown in strength, because one is able to really see for oneself that what the Buddha said, that samsara is truly full of suffering, is actually true. So then it is said that the Kadampa master, Geshe Langri Tangpa, would never smile. And if someone would ask him
Never
why,
show the happy face, maybe, no?
He would never smile or laugh or, show
black face, Roako.
Happy expression. He was known as someone who had a black expression, because when he looked at the state of the world, at the state of samsara, there's no reason to smile. So with this kind of understanding, then we can kind of develop our renunciation and make it grow, essentially.
Pena George Pade Adikal Loma Kake Shumaroa. Any Loma Ji Zeng go tone, Taba Nude Indu Lavaroa. That Loma Taki Sanda Wujena. Tata Yabu Kirorilla and George Shan Sawaroa. Karare Ladu Kogitan Koag Nesute Hakone, Ninju Sheyeres. Tangazunguneshana, Mugugi Sara, Inangazo Muton the Hakogda. We must know how to cry, you know.
So Atisha, the Lord Atisha, had a few disciples, right? And among them was one, let's say his name was Tashi, who was always covering his head with his robe and crying. And Atisha said that this is actually really excellent. This is a really excellent disciple. And he would even prostrate to this disciple. And the reason is that the reason he was always crying is because he understood how the nature of samsara was. So then for us too, we should also always cry, actually. But maybe we don't know how to cry like that, how to really see the suffering of samsara in such an intense way, right?
Then Jason Jambi Yongi soon so Kowala Hina Ninju Mes La so Kowa de Yabore Sound, Kowa de Pemisi, Tobore, Kowa de Injani Sound, Tangin Julia Mari, Kowa de Beduja Hivoji Risha, Jabo, Hinatabu Hivoji, Gitanko Noshin Ring Sound, that and Regi Hakoa Risha, why not that is so gone, and Ninju de Bill Abso to get a Hindoa.
So Manjushri has also said in the teaching called Parting from the Four Attachments that if you have attachment to samsara, you have no renunciation, meaning that having any kind of attachment means that it is impossible for true renunciation to arise in the mind. So actually, we really should understand samsara to be very frightening and very unpleasant. It's something we should see as being similar to a prison.
Tando duna nga zo lumba chobo tesoli visit zo gugiere. Pena jagor doji dinda wolndo na ta tombo mumbo yewa.
Mm.
Ani nga zo sono jin kogindo wa. Ta soso kanga chona ani chi dundeg lo le yiro wa. Te nginju le shene chi dundeg lo de le yiro wa. Ta tendere ta shubo deso la kanga yere tombo la kanga yere shubo deso koroso keje yere 당군에 갈라카본도 lumba라 tax 히워지 구긴도 GST 레긴도 가레 레긴도 세지레 tombo테소 기타 공체본도 가레 사그르 가레 통그르 다 도나타노 기테 히워 제긴도 세텐데 세이레 다 셰자 다 데소 소노 또나 당 코안델라도 타이나 여긴도 코안델라도 마셰와지소 구긴도 다 가레 시구르스도 아니 체조 구긴도 닌중 트러블레네 텐데 케자 몬보 예로와 다 공제 내수 쪼보 테소라 constitute mombo zo shewa yina ene ngenju le yire robert do chewa metabi kortela shewa yina tanda ngaronso kadambil lama pudowa sengi jire kongi yidante chewa metabi korte yila yero te shiro yabore ngazo gi yidam shiboji yilane ngagi yidamte karechi ngagi yidamte jezen jambi yilane lo sono ten joa ju는 roye maro medabu kol sono to na lo sono joa te ten rogin doa keno te te sono to ya kachi bores.
So basically, then it would be very good if we could go to a very poor place and see the state of people living there. For example, if we were to go to India, to Bodh Gaya, and experience for ourselves, like there are a lot of beggars there and the conditions are quite poor. So that's one way. And another is if we ourselves have some difficulties, if we face some suffering in our lives, then this will help us on the way to give rise to this mind of renunciation. For example, the rich have their own problems, right? They have to pay tax and, like they have their own issues. And the poor have the issue of maybe not having enough to eat or having to struggle to make a living. And, Kempela is saying these days, maybe Donald Trump is making it very hard for people over in the States. So, there are many kinds of situations like that, right? Another would be to really understand death and impermanence quite well. There was another Kadampa Geshe master who said that my yidam is death and impermanence. And this is a really, really, important statement. We may say something like, oh, my yidam is Manjushri, the deity I meditate on is Manjushri, but in the end, this doesn't really change our mind that much. It doesn't really change our heart in the depths. But contemplating death and impermanence definitely will influence us. So this is something we should really think about.
Oh, similarly, kage glagire ngagi tsai lama Dalai Lama, ngagi tsai lama sacha tinze, ngagi tsai lama let tingo chinze inse. Shibo lagire te pento shiro ye mare. Soso ge chi de nyolin shile soso ge koal taya do son jewa de zogura te nonshin. Ta soso ge nesu chobo te solo sono ton she ne. Ane ngenju de bil af zogugire. Te ka chebo chode yeres.
So some people would say something like, oh, my root guru is the Dalai Lama. My root guru is Sakya Chizin, or my root guru is the late Liu Kenshin Rinpoche. But just saying this is not actually so beneficial because it falls upon us to really make sure to have the determination to improve our own situation, to, build up our renunciation by means of visiting some places where people are experiencing a lot of difficulties and making this determination stronger and stronger.
Sheza
Laso
today
Khenpo.
imba indu ngazo che he du roa. Meta be kol mombo he na any kozo he ma ngazo trobo chogi mundu se lagindo wa. Ta meta be kol de so ngazo mombo ma he na any kozo ge semba den jowa tong tugi mare. Semba jowa tong ma na any nge che he ne kozo la pen ta tugi mare. Yina yume mombo ji lagindo wa. Shija ga do tende lumba la che he du meta be kol do donga kol he ye mares. Meta do donga kol de ma he ba ina condition ne miti mind the changes of tugire. Zotugi marwa. Entertainment teaching chibo hede na. Seson ta tesol sono tongu gurela. Eni ngenju legirela.
So sometimes in the context of Dharma teachings, people would say like, hey, it's not so good if you talk about death and impermanence too much because people are just going to get sad. Especially they might say that if you go abroad and teach Dharma, then, don't teach too much about death and impermanence. It's just kind of depressing. But actually, if we don't speak about these things, then it's not possible for people's minds to actually change. So it then becomes very important for us to really deeply consider death and impermanence. And it's also a very important topic for Dharma teachings. Also, kan plötsligt also tering tuzoxons and ingatis tering samshago gidos ngayan tuzoxons and in konta shugin.
Taso tuche nans ta. Eni keju yabo hirashi du jesu yeron yes.
Also tuche.
Laso.
Okay, thank you everyone. So we'll end today's session here.
Thank you, everyone, for
Amitabha.
coming.
Thank you so much, Kempo and Olaf. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you next time.
See you next time. Bye-bye.